you want me to say, dear Lord. I'll be what you want me to be. There's surely somewhere a lowly place in earth's harvest field so wide, where I may labor through life's short day for Jesus the crucified. So trusting my all unto thy care, I know thou lovest me. I'll do thy will with a heart sincere. I'll be what you want me to be. I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord, o'er mountain or plain or sea. I'll say what you want me to say, dear Lord. I'll be what you want me to be. It may not be on the mountain's height or over the stormy sea. It may not be at the battle's front my Lord will have need of me. But if by a still small voice he calls to paths I do not know, I'll answer, dear Lord, with my hand in thine. I'll go where you want me to go. I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord, o'er mountain or plain or sea. I'll say what you want me to say, dear Lord. I'll be what you want me to be. Perhaps today there are loving words that Jesus would have me speak. There may be now in the paths of sin some wanderer whom I should seek. me to be. There's surely somewhere a lowly place in earth's harvest field so wide, where I may labor through life's short day for Jesus the crucified. So trusting my all unto thy care, I know thou lovest me. I'll do thy will with a heart sincere. I'll be what you want me to be. To say, dear Lord, I'll be what you want me to be. It may not be on the mountain's height or over the stormy sea. It may not be at the battle's front. My Lord will have need of me. But if by a still small voice He calls to paths I do not know, I'll answer, dear Lord, with my hand in thine. I'll go where you want me to go. I'll go where you want me to go, dear Lord, o'er mountain or plain or sea. I'll say what you want me to say, dear Lord. I'll be what you want me to be. Perhaps today there are lovely somewhere a lowly place in earth's harvest field so wide, where I may labor through life's short day for Jesus the crucified. So trusting my all unto thy care, I know thou lovest me.
How God wants you to keep your temple. That's a blessing. Don't we all need to know? All right. And have you been blessed by what Elder Lemon has brought to us so far? All right. So without further ado, we wish for the Lord to be with him, to bless him, to anoint him, so that you all will be blessed. Amen. And just for future reference, if you can't write down the notes fast enough, the content will be on the website. It will also be online. Yes. So if you missed something, by God's grace, it should be available to you, okay? Amen.
All right.
And without further ado, Elder Lemon.
Thank you. Well, let me go ahead and say good evening to everyone. And I heard that you had a good day today, so I'm going to go ahead and trust that that was the truth. And I'm glad for that. And I'm glad we could be back, and this evening we can talk a little bit about unlocking the code to diabetes and really understanding. This is becoming a major plague, not just throughout the United States, but, you know, really in our world. And as a result of that, this is something that we need to address, okay? And I know how it is. You know, we all perhaps have had that stage in our lives where we felt like supermen and superwomen and felt like, nah, it's not going to happen to me. It happens to everybody else. Doesn't happen to me. Until one day you get some strange feelings, things start happening, and somebody eventually tells us, you know, you need to go see that doctor. And you see the doctor, and after they do their blood work or whatever it is, we discover, oh, I guess I'm not as super as I thought I was. And the good news is that if for some reason we realize that we have been afflicted with this disease, I am here to let you know that this is a very, very reversible disease, okay? Very, very reversible. It's just amazing of how much we have to take charge of our health. And as long as we do that, I mean, we can literally, it's almost as if there is something like a fountain of youth, if you will. Something where you can kind of get some of those years back, get some of that health back, some of your strength back, so that not we can squander it again, but that by God's grace, we can use it more effectively for God's glory and for the betterment of our fellow man. And so my hope and prayer is that as we get ready to touch on this subject this evening is that we'll take it to heart. And again, if you have diabetes, then obviously you really want to give double attention. But even if you don't, I am sure you don't have to think long before you discover someone you know that is struggling with that. So in either case, you know, let's consider the things we're going to be sharing, and then let's go forward and see how we can experience the power of the blessings and then share it with others. So before we do that, let's please bow for a word of prayer, and then we will begin. Our loving Father, we are so grateful that once again we have the privilege to come together and to learn, to understand, to be able to receive information that we can allow to go from the head to the heart and make it practical, that we can live a new life, that by your grace will allow us to be made free, even from the burden of sickness and disease. And I am grateful that you are one that you do not want us to be sick. For your word says that your desire for us, your great desire, is for us to prosper and to be in health. And so I pray, let this information that comes through this evening touch someone's heart, so that by your grace we will know more intelligently how we can bid farewell, perhaps forever, to this disease known as diabetes. And I thank you that you've heard this prayer. Trust also that you've answered it, for we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. I will tell you the truth. My heart was very touched today as I came in. You know, these are the kind of things that an instructor, a teacher, an educator, a preacher, a minister, these are the kind of things you want to hear all day long. You know, I am not concerned about, you know, whether I'm great or not, if I'm doing a good job and impressing everybody or not. That does very little for me. So when people are like, man, you're the man. Oh, man, you present this way, that way. Those things mean very little. But what means a lot is when someone can come to you and say, listen, what you shared last night, I was able to put it into practice today, and my body had a positive response to that information. And I want to thank God for what you shared and how it's helping me already just on day one. And I was privileged to hear that today. And I was just so happy to hear about someone who was hypertensive or is hypertensive. And they said they had a normal habit of doing things a certain way. But after last night, they said the Lord pricked their hearts and they said, no, by God's grace, I'm going to do better. And they determined to do that. And lo and behold, today they spoke on their victories. And I was just like, man, I said, praise God. That's the kind of information we want to hear all day long. Tell me how great God is and what he's doing for you. I don't care about how so-called great I am, because even when you call me great, I know I'm not. And I'm thankful for that. And so when we start going through this information, my goal, my hope, my prayer, the greatest way you could say thank you is not with applause. It's not with telling any individual, especially myself, how wonderful a teacher or expositor of the word or any of that. It's that you can say, what I learned tonight, by God's grace, I'm going to put it into practice, and I look forward to telling you about the great results that my body is experiencing. That's the best way in my mind to say thank you. And so I hope that that's something that I'll be able to hear a lot of thank yous from you all, is in that context. When we talk about diabetes, yes. Oh, the story. Thank you. Okay, so I guess I should go into the story before I even get started here, right? Okay, so I told a story on our opening night about a woman who had hypertension. And I told the story, and I gave y'all a heavy cliffhanger. I mean, I left you hanging. But I promised, I said, if you remind me, I'll go ahead and go over it. Now, you didn't remind me last night, but thank the Lord, tonight you have reminded me. So let me go ahead and tell you this story. So there was a lady who had hypertension. And the reason I told this story was because we were talking about whenever a disease shows up in our life, what's our first step? Ascertain the cause. So we got to find out what caused the disease. So again, when I was privileged to talk with this lady and, you know, she had hypertension, I said, well, how long did you have it? She said, I had it for 10 years. I said, okay, what happened 10 years ago? She said, my husband left me for another woman. And after she said that, I said, well, I know what that can cause. I said, that must have really stressed you out. And she said, oh, yes, it did. And as a result of that stress, it ultimately brought on hypertension in her life. Well, I began to ask her, well, it's been 10 years now. And I said, you know, have you forgiven your ex-husband for what he did to you? And she said, absolutely not. And I mean, she wanted to make it clear, no, I have not forgiven him. And there was nothing in her countenance that looked like she was ever going to forgive him. Now, that's where I left you at the cliffhanger, and I wanted to tell you the rest of the story. So here's the rest of the story. So I'm sitting down with the sister, and she's like, you know, there's no way, absolutely not. And she's just really mad at what this man did to her, because what he did was wrong. All right? So when she said that, I was praying in my mind. I pray a lot in my mind, and you know, I'm like, Lord, what's the best thing to say to her? And so as she told me, I will not forgive him, then I said, then you know what? She said, what? I said, this consultation is over. And she said, really? Why? I said, look, sis, if you want to manage your disease, you can find the nearest clinic and the nearest physician that can help you with that. But when you want to have your disease cured, I said, there's only one who can do that, and that is God. But in order for God to cure or heal you or alleviate you from your disease, you have to do things his way. And God makes it very clear that if you don't forgive others, he will not forgive you. And he will not pardon you. And he will frustrate the blessings he wanted to give you. And so if you're not willing to forgive him, then I don't really have much that I can offer you. And therefore, this consultation is over. She said, you don't understand what he did to me. He did this. And she started going down the list. So I said, all right, I'll tell you what. I said, let's do it this way. Why don't you write down a list of everything that your husband did, ex-husband, did that offended you? And she said, that's going to be easy, because she kept it fresh in her mind for 10 years. So she was like, that's going to be a piece of cake. I said, now, but what I want you to do next is I want you to write down a list of what you've done to God over the past 10 years. And as she began to think about that, I said, if you finish your list on your ex-husband's offenses versus your offenses to God, my question is very simple to you. Who honestly is the greater offender? And she said, I am. I said, then what do you want God to do with you, considering you're the greater offender? I want him to forgive me. Then I said, then what do you think God wants you to do with him, who's the lesser offender? She said, but I'm so angry at him. I said, let me show you how God can take your anger away. I began to show her principles in the Bible about God giving us his peace and taking away our bitterness, our anger, our resentment. A good Bible verse for you all to look at on that is Ephesians chapter 4, verses 31 and 32. I want you to always remember those verses. Ephesians chapter 4. If you have a problem with forgiveness, because I'm telling you right now, if you harbor bitterness, anger, and resentment in your heart towards others who have offended you, it can literally work in your system almost like cancer. It can debilitate your immune system. It'll literally work against you. You can pop all the pills and the pharmaceuticals you desire. It will work but to a certain point, okay? So we have to learn how to let go of that bitterness, that anger, and that resentment. So I walked her through Ephesians 4, 31, 32. And as we looked at that, I love how it closed because it showed so clearly. It says, forgiving one another, and then it says, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. I said, I want you to always remember that. You're the greater offender, but God, for Christ's sake, was still willing to forgive you. And that love that comes from the cross is what will enable you to forgive those who have offended you less than you have offended God. And so I began to give her principles on meditating upon the cross and understanding what took place on that cross and what that means to us. And as she did that for several weeks, do you know that woman was able to let God take away her bitterness? Let God take away her anger, take away her resentment. And as a result of all of those negative elements being taken away from her life, she was free. Her conscience was free. Literally, now she was able to have a more greater calm in her heart when his name comes up, when she sees his face in her children, and et cetera, et cetera. And as a result of that, within a few weeks, guess who had perfect blood pressure? Same woman. And so the point is very simple. We have yet to understand how powerful this mind is. We have yet to understand. Have you ever heard of the laughing doctor? You ever heard of the story of the laughing doctor? This is a story. You can actually go online. You can Google it. The laughing doctor, the doctor who laughed his cancer away, something like that. And what happened, true story, is a doctor who actually got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The doctors told him, he's a physician, and the doctors told him, they said, listen, you only have about a few months to live. Your cancer is very advanced. And so as a result of that, he had to go home. He decided to sell his practice. He went home and he began to tell his family, look, you know, unfortunately, I've been diagnosed with a very serious cancer. It's at a very high stage and I am going to lose my life. This is what I've been told. So what he told his family is he said, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do things for preparation for this. But he says, but I need 1 month to myself. He says, I want 1 month to myself. And the family agreed. And what he did was he went away. He went away, rented out a cabin by a lake out in the country, in the woods. And when he went away and did that, he decided to rent a whole lot of movies. Honeymooners, Leave It to Beaver, all these old black and white, sitcoms. These ones that were a bit more clean than the things that obviously are playing today. And, this is obviously an old story. And, he got all of these movies and he just decided to go up into this cabin. He was an older gentleman. And he just put those things in. He ate his food and he enjoyed relaxation because he had a very successful medical practice. Therefore, stress, overworked a lot. And he was just relaxing, watching these programs, and he was laughing his brains out. I mean, just laughing and laughing and laughing to the point that he didn't remember the last time he laughed like this. Did that for 30 days. 30 days over, he goes ahead, leaves, comes back home, sees his family. Hello, family. All right, well, let's go ahead and let's start preparing for my death. But he noticed that he was feeling pretty good. But he knew what he was diagnosed with. So he eventually had to go back to the doctor and get checked out. So he goes back to the doctor and he gets checked out. This is a true story. He goes back to the doctor, he gets checked out, they do their CT scan, they do everything on him. And literally, the doctors are scratching their heads and they're saying, wait a minute. We know what we saw in your system. Mr. So-and-so, your cancer is completely gone. I mean, his cancer was 100% gone. He said, no way. They said, yes way. We can't explain it, but your cancer's gone. What did you do? He said, I rented out a cabin and I got some movies that, were movies that were humorous to me. And he was just spending a lot of time in laughter. In other words, the point is very simple. We think sometimes, if we're not careful, that God was joking when he says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Sometimes we underestimate those verses. But if sometimes you could see some of our faces when we go throughout the day, as my family and I were literally on our way here today, we were driving, we were getting ready to go in the car, and we saw a young girl. She only looked like she had to be no older than 15 years old. And you could literally see her. Number one, she was walking like this, head down. And she didn't have a gadget in her hand. Because at least if she had a gadget in her hand, now we got some logic of why her head's down. She had no gadget in her hand. She just has her hands in her pocket, and she's walking, and her whole countenance looks like something devastating has happened in her life. What we don't understand is that if you were to dare to pay attention to people's faces when you walk, I don't know if you do that, but I do. I'm an observer of people's faces. I'm a keen observer. I look at people's faces all the time. And you would be amazed at how many of us look sad. We look beat up, and we look very down, angry, discouraged, and seriously hurt. And sometimes our countenance is indicative of what's going on deep down inside of our hearts. And that's why I firmly believe that sometimes when the Bible tells that story about that paralytic who is sick and, his friends ripped the roof open and lower him before Jesus, and that brother wanted to get well, he's sick, but when Jesus looks at him, Jesus has so much discernment that Jesus says, my son, be of good cheer, your sins are forgiven. When he was able to say that, it was wise because Jesus understood, yes, you need to be physically healed, but far more important is you need mental, spiritual, and emotional healing. And so it is with a lot of us today, because if we can get over some of the unfortunate baggage and things that have happened to us when we were a child that we never got over, if we could get over that, we could almost laugh our diabetes away. But because we're still in the struggle and in the grind and in the fight, I'm going to have to show you a lot of these additional dynamics of how to get rid of such an incredibly simple disease to overcome. And so I just want you to think about that, okay? Let's see what we can do to start learning how to tap into a greater happiness, a greater merry heart in our experience with God. And I promise you, you will not regret it. Is that all right? All right. So as we get ready to go through this now with diabetes, I'm going to play a little video clip, and I'm just going to let you kind of take a look at what exactly is diabetes. I want you to take a look at this video. It's very short. And then after that, I'll come back, and then we'll just walk right through the process, and we'll talk about the disease and, more importantly, how to overcome it. Here we go.
Type 2 diabetes occurs when your pancreas does not produce enough insulin, and your body is resistant to the insulin that is produced. Insulin is a hormone that helps your body use blood sugar, known as glucose, for energy. Your body takes the food you eat and breaks down fat, protein, and carbohydrates for energy. During the digestion process, the carbohydrates from your food are broken down into glucose. Glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream where it is carried to cells throughout your body. A healthy pancreas releases a regular supply of insulin into your bloodstream. After you eat, your blood glucose levels rise, and your pancreas responds by releasing more insulin to move the glucose into your cells. Insulin acts as a key, opening up the cell so it can accept the glucose. In a person with type 2 diabetes, your insulin receptors are less sensitive. Though your pancreas continues to produce some insulin, it is not enough to meet your body's needs. When your body's cells are less responsive to insulin, it is more difficult for glucose to enter the cells and raise your blood glucose level. As a person with type 2 diabetes, it is important to monitor and maintain healthy blood glucose levels. Over a long period of time, high blood glucose levels can lead to serious health complications such as heart attack and stroke, blindness, kidney failure, and nerve damage. By getting daily physical activity, eating a healthy diet, and taking your prescribed medication, you will decrease your chances of developing complications from diabetes.
With diabetes. There's no talk about cure. And this is something that's a real big problem, because you have people all over the world who have had diabetes and don't have it anymore, which means the disease is incredibly curable. But it's just that for some reason, that's not the talk of the town. And the reason why is because of option number 3 that came up on the screen. Option number 3 was drugs. You see, if a person can be cured, now any physician that is intelligent will tell you drugs don't cure. Any physician who is truly intelligent in studying pharmaceuticals will tell you that drugs don't cure. So people do not take drugs to be cured. They take drugs to control the disease, to control it, to make sure that things don't get out of control and all of these things. But the problem is sometimes, of course, drug medications can actually complicate the issue, and we'll talk about that. But the real issue is that cure is possible, but the mind and the body in many respects can only go so far as what it can see, what it can understand. So if you and I don't think cure, if we don't think healing, then a lot of times that's not going to be our experience. If we only think treatment management, then that's all we're going to have is treatment and management. So the first thing I want us to understand is that if you're diabetic in this room, think cure, think healing. Don't think just treatment and management, okay? Which means we're going to have to look at something outside of the world of drug medication. So we're going to take a look at this because diabetes type 2, quite honestly, is very, very much a lifestyle disease. But let me add a couple of other points to that. It's not just a lifestyle disease, it's a Western debilitating lifestyle disease. We call that WDLD. WDLD. Hypertension, WDLD. Diabetes, WDLD. Osteorheumatoid arthritis, WDLD. Several cancers, WDLD. What does that stand for? Western debilitating lifestyle diseases. When that Western lifestyle, which is the American lifestyle, when that lifestyle is adopted, then we're going to start seeing a lot of the same diseases coming up in different parts of our world. I remember I was in Botswana, Africa, and when I was there, you know, I'm thinking, oh boy, here I am, a black man, and I'm going to Africa. I get to touch the soil of the motherland. And so I'm excited about that. And when I went there, I remember that we landed in Johannesburg, and then we had to take a bus, and then we took the bus over to Botswana. And when we got into Botswana, I remember somebody said, would you like for us to take you to the mall? And I said, yeah, you know, because I'm thinking, man, I'm going to see like a jungle mall or something. You know, I'm thinking I'm going to see something totally different than what I thought I would see in America. Because all my life as an American, I know about malls. Sure enough, when I walked there, it looked just like a regular mall in America. And I was just like, this is so disappointing. And then on top of that, when we go inside, I walk through the stores, I mean, they're playing the same music. You know, I want to hear some native music, you know, whatever. They're playing the same music we hear in America. Then I took a picture of it and showed it to my family. Then it said our national breakfast. And I looked at the national breakfast, eggs, toast, bacon, orange juice. You know, I'm like, this is American, you know, or whatever. In other words, the world, many countries all throughout our world, they are becoming more and more westernized. And that's why we should not be surprised that the same diseases that we have here, same diseases we're seeing in Europe, same diseases we're seeing in Asia, same diseases we're seeing in Africa, and many other places in the world. And so it is that we need to understand that this Western debilitating lifestyle is what's bringing about all these various diseases. But the good news is that if my lifestyle brought it on, then by God's grace, if I can make some changes in my lifestyle, then maybe my new lifestyle can make it go away. You get that? So that's what we're going to talk about. So when you think about diabetes, you know, when we start paying attention to this, watch this. What exactly is it? We just kind of saw it, and I think it was a very informative short video clip, but let's reiterate, you know, because repetition deepens the impression. If I were to go to my little medical book here, Disarming Diabetes, you know, the book is Health Power, but, you know, this chapter on disarming diabetes, when I go through this and kind of walk through the steps, I'm taking right from here, and I just put it right here on the screen. In Health Power, page 52, here's what it says. Talking about diabetes, it says it occurs when the body becomes unable to handle glucose or sugar, which builds up to dangerous levels in the blood, okay? That's what we call diabetes, is when the body is unable to handle the glucose or sugar that's developing in the system, in the bloodstream, and it builds up to dangerous levels in our bloodstream. Now, continuing with that, let's go ahead and let's take a look at the next point. Going a little bit further with what is diabetes, how do we diagnose it? The diagnosis is, it usually is made when a blood sugar test is consistently above 125 milligrams after an 8-hour fast. That's why you'll usually hear, go to bed at night. When you get up in the morning before you eat anything, go ahead and get your sugar tested. And, when you get that little prick and then it goes onto the machine, a lot of us will find out what's happening. Now, here's the deal. Fasting blood sugar levels of 110 to 125 are known as pre-diabetes. Really and truly, it's anything above 99. Once you get above 99, like today, if you get a CBC, a complete blood count from a hospital or what have you, it's going to have that number for your glucose levels at 99. And then anything above that, they're going to pretty much put you in the pre-diabetic category. So even though this is saying 110 to 125, it's being a little generous. Nowadays, it's pretty much anything above 99 up to 125. So 99 to 124, you're considered pre-diabetic. Once you're 125 and above, that's considered full-blown diabetic. If you want to know what's my goal, then what you do is you get under 99. Okay? So your goal is to get below 99. That's what you want to shoot for. Once you see that your blood sugar levels are getting down under 99, then praise the Lord. You can say, all right, diabetes, I bid thee farewell. All right? So that's our goal. Now, continuing, who has it? Who is it that is stricken with this disease? Diagnosed and undiagnosed diabetes in the United States. Did you know 29.1 million people, or 9.3% of the people, have diabetes, right? Now watch this. This is a very important point here. Of the 29.1 million people, diagnosed are 21. So what does that mean? That means, my friends, that there are approximately 8.1 million people or more that are actually diabetics and they don't even know it. Now, you'll remember the other night I talked to you about this, and this is very serious. You remember the other night I told you that for some reason we have this habit where we can go years and years and years and we do not see doctors. We don't see doctors because we don't like them. We don't see doctors because we're afraid of them. We don't see doctors because we don't think it's relevant. People don't see doctors for a lot of reasons. But the bottom line is that, listen, I always find it an interesting thing that if you see a little boy inside of this place, in this room right now, this is a church. Even though we're doing health education, but I prefer to call it the gospel of health education. Is that all right? And we are in a church right now. But the truth of the matter is that if we were in a church having more of an official worship service, and if you saw a little boy running around and playing games and stuff, we would probably say something to the effect of, look at how irreverent that child is in the house of God. If we saw people just kind of, taking food and talking to each other and eating their meals and all that stuff inside, we say, look at this. They are not behaving well in the house of God. This is God's temple. We need to take better care of God's sanctuary. Not every and anything can be done in God's church. But it's funny how we have so much respect for a building with brick walls, but we forget that our bodies are temples and that we're not supposed to let any and anything inside of here. We're not supposed to let anything happen inside of here. The same way that we have, deacons and deaconesses and others who sometimes will be so kind to help make sure that the floors are swept, to make sure that chairs are properly aligned, to make sure that there's a good atmosphere, good air cooling, a good, scent in the room. We make sure to do all these things. But at the same time, when it comes to our bodies, we're not making sure it's clean. We're not making sure it's well kept. My point is very simple, family. If we're gonna give so much attention to the building, how much the more you should give attention to your body, which is the temple of God, of which He desires to dwell. Does that make sense? Now, understanding that, my friends, how do you really know if you're healthy? How do you really know that you're okay? Or are you throwing some dice and gambling with your health? This is the reason why I encourage you. You need to get yourself at least an annual checkup. You owe yourself that. at least an annual checkup. There's no drug administration in that. You're just simply letting them take a look at the heart and make sure they're not hearing a murmur. Because if they hear a murmur, you might have a valve prolapse. And if you have a valve prolapse, you might have regurgitation. And if you have regurgitation, you might be on your way to heart failure and you never even realized it. It's just that simple. And so that's the reason why you want to do checkups. Some of us, if we have our blood drawn, we might see, hey, I got high bilirubin, or I might have a high, or low, rather, lymphocyte count. Once you start seeing these things are off, it's letting you know, hey, you probably didn't realize it, but your body is becoming an open avenue to certain diseases. You might want to do something to correct it. And it might be so simple to correct it. So that's the whole point. Catch it while it's early, but you can't catch what you don't know. And the best way to know is to get checked out. And how much the more when there are 8.1 million people at least that are literally walking around right now and they are undiagnosed diabetics. And diabetics is a lot more serious than just having a low lymphocyte count. You need to understand literally diabetes, if it's not checked and if it is not controlled, some of the most incredibly challenging diseases. I mean, I watched this with my father. I watched him go into renal failure. I watched him have to go on dialysis. I watched him have to get his legs cut off. I mean, that's some sad stuff. And just to know, man, if I just would have caught it by just being a little bit more judicious with my life, my body, God's temple, man, I probably could have caught it and don't have to worry about half the issues that I'm going through right now. You understand that? So please, family, let's do this thing intelligently, all right? Stop taking care of these brick wall buildings so well, and yet we neglect our bodies. Let's give the most prized temple of God the greatest level of our attention while we continue to take care of the building as well. Is that all right? Can we agree to that? All right, let's continue. Undiagnosed 8.1 million people are walking around right now with diabetes. Don't even know it. Then, to even add more to this, there are types of diabetes. Now, when we talk about types of diabetes, there's a specific reason why I'm emphasizing one more than the other this evening. But if there's anybody in this room that has either or, I definitely want you to come see me. By the way, let me tell you this now. I didn't say this last night. I need someone to function in the capacity of an usher this evening. And I need you all to get one of these. What this is a consultation sheet. The purpose of this consultation sheet is for you to fill it out if you would like a free one-on-one lifestyle consultation to look at whatever it is that's ailing you and to see how, by God's grace, we can put together a lifestyle program that we can see your lifestyle improve and, by God's grace, your disease go away within a period of time. So that's the great purpose of giving these to you. So I'm going to ask someone to function in the capacity of an usher at some point this evening before everyone leaves. And I'm going to ask you to take one of these and then you can fill it out and give it back to us tonight. And then that way we can immediately start availing ourselves so we can do our best to help you. Our goal is to help you. OK, so I'm going to leave these here. But let's continue. There's something called type 1 diabetes. It was generally called insulin insulin-dependent child diabetes, juvenile diabetes. And then there's type 2, which is considered non-insulin-dependent diabetes, okay? So you have type 1, insulin-dependent. Then you got type 2, non-insulin-dependent, all right? And when we talk about type 1, again, you see the picture of a child because it was generally referred to as juvenile diabetes, okay? When we talk about that, it afflicts about 5% of diabetics. That's the reason why you don't usually see in any type of education on diabetes, you're not going to hear a lot about type 1 because it affects, a very small percentage of those of us in America. However, that small percentage is still precious both to man and to God, so we need to give it attention. So again, if you're type 1, you make sure you see me. There's some special programs that can be done for those who are type 1. What happens here is it's a type of diabetes usually beginning in childhood and is commonly known as juvenile diabetes. These type of diabetics cannot survive without insulin. Therefore, they are called insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus, okay? That's type 1. When we get into type 2, this is again kind of like what you were watching more so in the video earlier. In type 2 diabetes, it's called adult onset diabetes or non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. This type affects over 90% of diabetics, okay? What's the issue? It's called adult onset diabetes, or most type 2 diabetics have plenty of insulin in their bodies when diagnosed, but something's blocking the insulin so it cannot do its job properly. Do you remember when you saw how the pancreas, the way our body, I tell you the truth, when David says in Psalms 139 and verse 14, when he says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, marvelous are thy works. I mean, that is not an understatement. It's amazing how our body has just been so wonderfully put together, so intelligently put together. And so it is that when you eat food, when it gets down into our system, goes down the esophagus, obviously gets into the stomach and what have you, and it starts to get broken down and eventually starts to go into the bloodstream. When it does that, it's an immediate signal to the pancreas to start going ahead and getting out some of that insulin. So while the glucose is flowing through your system, the pancreas is shooting out the insulin, and the insulin is riding with your glucose. And the purpose of the insulin riding with the glucose is because that glucose has to get into a cell. It has to get into a cell. It can't just flow free in the bloodstream. If it did that, ultimately we would all die. So therefore, God is a systematic God. He's a God of order, 1 Corinthians 14:40. And so it is that God expects his bodies that he created to work in an order. And so whenever we eat the food gets broken down, the glucose goes into the bloodstream. As it does that, pancreas releases the insulin. The insulin is riding with it to the cell. When it gets to the cell, the insulin goes to the cell and lets the cell know, open up, let this glucose in. And then the cell is like, no problem, boom, opens up, glucose goes in, and that's what we call a wonderfully working body. The problem is something causes the insulin and the glucose are riding together. The insulin gets to that cell. The insulin says, all right, open up. And for some reason, that cell is not responding the way it's supposed to that insulin. And hence the glucose is like, all right, we're trying to get in. We're trying to get in. Okay, I guess we'll just float around in the bloodstream. And then as a result of that, if that happens repeatedly, you get a high glucose level, diabetic. You understand that? So we got to find out what that something is that's causing that blockage, that cell response to not happen. We got to find out what's causing that. Because remember, whenever we have a disease, what's the first step we do? Ascertain the cause. So let's find out the cause on that. So we're going to go into some warning signs because, again, if we're undiagnosed diabetics, we should understand at least, what are the warning signs? Because there might be somebody in this room, even tonight, that might say, well, I haven't been to a doctor in a while, but whoa, I'm going through some of those things. I think I need to check that out. Now, always remember, according to the Bible, out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, so let it be established. When I put up some witnesses on the screen, don't just see one witness and say, I got diabetes. Don't do that. You understand that? It's like out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. It's funny. I actually had a doctor tell me that. He just did it from a secular standpoint. He said, usually when the body is going through something, it'll have probably 2 or 3 signals, kind of like witnesses that will let you know. And I was just like, he said witnesses. It was just, minister mind. So I was just like, that brother said witnesses. It's like, but that's the point, is that you don't go crazy. You don't go from a stomach ache to colon cancer. You get my point? It's like you're going to usually have 1, 2, 3 or more things happening that gets you to that place that you say, I think this might be ABC disease. You get that? Okay, so what are some of the warning signs? Well, frequent urination is definitely one. If you find even when you are not drinking a lot of water, you're finding that, man, I am just constantly in the bathroom urinating again and again and again and again. And you're like, I'm not even drinking a whole lot of water or anything, but I'm just finding myself urinating frequently. It may be that could be a situation with diabetes. In addition to that, weight loss. You just find your weight just starts dropping. You find like, man, I'm not even working out or anything, but it seems like my weight is dropping. That's something you really want to pay attention to as well, okay? Because, I'm not going to get into the whys because it gets a little bit scientific, but the point is that if you start seeing that could be a sign as well. Then, of course, there's excessive thirst. No matter how much you drink, you never really seem to feel satisfied and truly hydrated. So as a result of that, you just keep drinking, keep drinking, keep drinking, keep drinking. That can be a sign as well. And then, of course, lack of energy. Lack of energy could be a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with diabetes. But if you're finding, wait a minute, I'm going through frequent urination, I'm not doing excessive thirst, but I'm finding that there are some things happening with my weight that I'm thinking I need to pay attention to, and I'm really low on energy. If you were going 1, 2, 3, then I would say, yeah, you might want to check your glucose. And that's as simple as going to a CVS or a Rite Aid, and you can get one of those systems, go to bed tonight, wake up tomorrow morning before you eat anything, go ahead and test yourself. And you can go ahead and see the numbers. And if you see the numbers are up there, above what number? Yeah, you see that, oh man, I'm at 101, 105, 115, whatever. Hey, you know what? I think I need to set an appointment with my doctor. I think I need to find out what's going on. I think I need a confirmation. Get one of those A1C tests. Look at the past 3 months of your history, and if you see, whoa, look at that. I do actually have this. I am diabetic. Okay, no problem. You don't have to scream yet. You just need to get to work. And so we can go ahead and work on some things to make some changes. Now, again, first step, I heard you say it, so I'm not even going to ask. We know we need to find out what's the cause. The scriptures teach us the curse, causeless, shall not come. A disease never comes without a cause. Therefore, the cause that we don't know, we do what? You search it out. The cause that I don't know, I'm going to search it out so I can figure out what's going on. All right? You'll remember that we talked about that yesterday for those who were with us. Now, Ray D. Strand, he put together a booklet because a lot of times when we discover that we have any disease, many a times we're going to get a protocol which is going to push us right to the world of medication. One day when I was in Tennessee at a sanitarium called Meat Ministry, an absolutely phenomenal place, and when I was there, I remember I was going through a program to do a detox because, you know, when you go through an open heart surgery, you're going to be under general anesthesia, and general anesthesia is powerful. You know, I remember when I was laying there and the guy put it in my arm and I said, "Is that it?" And he said, "Yep, it's all in." And I was like, wow. And all I did is I remember I turned my head to the left and everything went black. I mean, just think about something has to be powerful. That 1 minute it's in your arm and it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom. And I mean, you're gone. And I was down for 5.5 hours. You understand that? Or more. So I don't trust drugs in my system like that because drugs are like mercenaries. They hang around even after the war. You know, so it's like, nah, I'm not going to let, I want to do a cleanse. So I decided I'm going to get a cleanse. And so I decided to do a cleanse, and I went to this place, Meat Ministry, to get that done. And as I'm doing a nice detox and all these things, I remember at one point while I was there, there was a moment where my heart was racing. It was going pretty fast. And when my heart was racing and going fast, I was just like, man, I said, why is that happening? Now, if I would have just simply said, "Doctor, my heart rate is really up there. It's going pretty fast. What should I do?" Their answer is going to be very simple. Metoprolol. We're going to put you on a beta blocker. And one of the common beta blockers is metoprolol. And, if you ever looked at metoprolol, I don't know if any of you are on beta blockers, but if you ever looked at the side effects, it's amazing. It's supposed to slow the heart down so that, it does not go to, overstress itself and possibly get a heart attack. Well, here it is that one of the side effects of metoprolol is heart attack. And I'm just like, there's got to be a better way. You understand that? So you kind of get to a point where you really know what they're going to prescribe. So as a result of that, as I'm talking with the team, one sister said, "Brother Lemon, have you been drinking your water over the past several days?" I said, "Well, I have to admit I wasn't because I thought the juicing and all this stuff was." They was like, no. You still need to get your water in. Do me a favor. I want you to take your water and I want you to do it. I want you to take about a cup of water every 15 minutes over the next hour. And so I did that. Every 15 minutes, I timed it, took a cup of water. 15 minutes go by, took another cup of water. 15 minutes go by, took another cup of water. Next thing you know, I checked my pulse. It went dropped right back down to 72 beats per minute. And so it's amazing in my mind to think, look at this. If we just simply understood our body and our systems better and how to take care of it, a lot of things that we're running to the world of prescription for that sometimes is a risk and a gamble, we could have a better outcome. So what Dr. Ray D. Strand did is he realized, he says, look, people need to understand that, these medications that a lot of times we're jumping to and running to and taking for months and years on end, we need to understand that there are some serious complications with these things, to the point that he even talked about it in comparison to learning nutrition. And here's something he said. He said, in his book, Death by Prescription, he says, in medical school, I had not received any significant instruction on the subject of nutrition. He says, I was not alone. Only approximately 6% of the graduating physicians in the United States have any training in nutrition. Medical students may take elective courses on the topic, but few actually do. The education of most physicians is disease-oriented with a heavy emphasis on pharmaceuticals. We learn about drugs and why and when to use them. Okay? So he was very, very honest about this. And so many of us honestly take the advice to go ahead and take ABC medications for our issues. We can continue living any type of lifestyle we want, and we just pop that pill when we need it, when things get a little out of control. But what's happening now is that people are discovering that even some of the most, what we would call innocent medications, are starting to really become more and still more problematic. One of them is something called NSAIDs, okay? And when we think about this, I'm going to talk to you about this non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAID, N-S-A-I-D, NSAID, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And these things sell like hotcakes. I mean, it's probably in almost all of our medicine cabinets. And the reality is that there's a program, a news article that came out, and I want you to listen to this clip because this was very alarming, and this is another reason why we have to take charge of our health. Notice this clip right here.
Toughening up warnings on some popular non-aspirin painkillers, saying that the drugs cause an increased risk of heart failure. The agency says it's making the change in light of some new data that just came out, and the affected brands are ones you know, Advil, Motrin, Aleve, for example. Let's bring in Dr. Marty Makary, physician and professor of public health at Johns Hopkins. So Dr. Makary, we all know the names of those brands. What does this data really tell us?
Well, it's interesting. These are some of the most popular medications in the United States. I mean, maybe up to a quarter of everybody in the country are on one of these medications. And what the FDA here is saying is that we've known about the risks to the heart. They're very small, but we now have more information that those risks are definitely there. So they are upgrading the warning that goes on these medications to say it's not just that they may cause heart problems, is that they can cause heart problems, especially in patients that are high risk for heart problems.
Can you describe those heart problems? Because I think when we hear a story like this, we think, okay, so I'm going to take a few Advil and suddenly I'm going to have a heart attack. It's easy to go from point A to point B too quickly. So what kind of heart problems are we talking about here?
Well, these are problems like early onset heart attack and valve problems, problems with the heart function. But the real concern here is that patients that are at risk for these things happening anyway, people with a family history of heart attack or have had heart surgery in the past, it can precipitate these events sooner. And that's why the FDA is saying if you're at high risk, you're really the population that needs to say, hey, don't just take medications because we've thought they're safe. We liberally prescribe these medications telling people they're safe.
Right.
We should think twice when people don't really need them.
According to the New York Times, the studies estimated that the relative risk increased by 10 to 50%, depending on the drugs and the dosages. So if you have any sort of heart problems in your family history, should you avoid these drugs completely? Why even take any of them?
Well, these are what we call lifestyle drugs. They're not preventing disease or treating disease. They're usually just allowing you to function better, usually. So if you can get by without them, get by without them if you're high risk for heart disease. You know, you see patients all the time that say, you know, doc, I'd rather just not take any medications. I don't like taking medications. There's probably some wisdom there when you don't need them.
It is, you know, you think about the reasons why, very simple reasons why you might take a painkiller, and now you hear other things about, for example, Tylenol. One wonders if there's any really safe painkillers out there, Dr. Makary.
Yeah, now Tylenol is separate from this, so it's considered an alternative to the drugs concerning in this report, but it's got its own risks of liver problems in high doses. So yeah, there's probably no totally benign, safe medication out there. Even aspirin is in this family, and that's what we use to treat heart attacks.
Well, it's a good thing. Just a reminder, if you don't really need it, don't take it. If you do take it, you have to be aware of this, and maybe just a nice warm cup of tea might help as well. Path of least resistance. Dr. Makary, great to have you on as always. Thank you very much.
This is the world we live in now. You know, this is where it's at. You know, we really have to understand. I have had the privilege of talking with so many, and I talk with a lot of physicians. You know, I talked to you about the Amen conference last night. I mean, I know physicians on just about every scope of the work, from gastrointestinal to, you know, brain surgeons, neurologists. And when I talk with them, I'm like, guys, you know, and they're part of the same faith that I'm a part of. You know, we all talk to each other. And I feel so privileged because I get to ask them questions, and they know, they're like, look, we are under a system that is broken. They admit it clear as day. And these are high-level, very, very successful people. And this is why we have to start understanding those alternatives. What are things that we can take for pain? You know, it's not that God wants us to just suffer in pain, but are there other things that we can take? And there's a ton. This is why we have to get to that place that we really start understanding different herbs, different hydrotherapy treatments, different types of things like this. My hope and my prayer is that even this church becomes a beautiful lighthouse around this surrounding community where people can learn how to do these things. On Sunday, we're going to do a little cooking class. That's true. But in addition to a cooking class, if you take penicillin, you know, we're getting ready to get up into the fall and winter season very soon, in a few months. Well, if you take penicillin, we're going to show you how to make nature's penicillin. We're going to show you how to make something that can actually boost up your immune system, just like we would expect from other medications, but this one is going to be totally food. You have a toothache. We're going to show you how to go ahead and make something for your toothache that you can actually use, and the thing works just as powerful, if not more, like Ambisol. But it's all going to be simple natural ingredients rather than things that can get into our bloodstream that can more than likely have these adverse effects that we keep hearing about. We're going to talk about things that can be an alternative to something like an aspirin, a blood thinner, to make sure you don't get blood clots, etc. What are the anticoagulant, or what are some of these antiplatelet type things that we can take in the event that I'm high risk for heart attack? What are the things that we can take? So we need to talk about that, because normally if we're diabetic, what's going to happen is they're going to begin, boom, putting us right on the different drugs to go ahead and say, here's how you're going to control it. Not cure it, not overcome it, but control it. So these are things we have to pay attention to, because there's a lot of things out there that are prescribed in relation to, you know, diabetes and what have you. But again, the complications are pretty serious. So, you know, anti-inflammatory steroids like prednisone and dexamethasone, diuretics like thiazides, they're used to eliminate excess fluids from the body, antihypertensives to reduce arterial pressure, immunosuppressants. You know, all of these are those type of medications that are having some of the more and still more very vicious side effects as it relates to our bodies, and, you know, causing us to go through double an issue outside of the disease. But in addition to that, now we have to combat some of the side effects that's coming from the medications. What are the things that therefore cause the type 2 diabetes? Let's get to that so we can kind of meet it from the cause and then work our way up to the cure. So if we're talking about things that can cause type 2 diabetes, you know, it can occur if any process results in the destruction or malfunction of insulin in the cells in the rest of the body. Now, that can include, obviously, gene mutations. You know, these things are what we call, again, you remember we talked about heredity last night, you know, inherited acquired mutations in the insulin receptors. That is something that we can factor in. But we learned last night that lifestyle is what pulls the trigger when it comes to heredity. Heredity just loads the gun, but lifestyle is what pulls the trigger. So just because dad or mom had it doesn't mean you're destined to have it, as long as you don't do what mom and dad did. Well, what really are the issues? Well, here's where it gets kind of interesting. I love this story. This is a story about James Anderson, MD, in Kentucky. And what they did was they did a test in relation to diabetes. Because when you think of hypertension, you think about what? Salt. When you think about diabetes, you think about sugar. Now, what they did was a pretty awesome test that just really was what we would call a game changer. Dr. Anderson decided, I'm going to take a group of healthy, lean young men. The beautiful story is right here in this book, Health Power. I was reading it and going over it, and it's excellent. He goes into the idea that there was a group of healthy, lean young men. And what he did was he had all of them eat a high-fat diet and very little sugar. Very little sugar, but a high-fat diet. When he did that, within 2 weeks, every single one of those young men became mild diabetics. Every single one of them. But then what he did to even magnify the experiment is he got another group of lean, healthy men. And he fed them a low-fat diet, but then he fed them 1 pound of sugar per day for 11 weeks. I mean, he was like, I'm going to prove this. 1 pound of sugar per day for 11 weeks. 0 diabetics. 0. None. So the reality is that as much as we think about sugar as the culprit, the real culprit is the fat. That's the real culprit. It's the fat. And so when we look at that, when we're looking at causes, we're talking about fat, number one, in the diet, but also fat that builds up on the body. You understand that? Fat in the diet, fat in the body. These are the things that we want to really start paying attention to. This is where we want to hone in our focus when we're talking about type 2 diabetes. Fat in the diet, fat in the body. It doesn't mean that you can just go crazy with sugar. That's not the message, okay? The message is not that sugar's good. Sugar is very contributive to many metabolic issues, of course. It's an empty calorie product. Sugar does not give the body, we're talking especially about refined sugar, white sugar, it does not give your body nutrition, but it requires nutrition in order to be metabolized. So therefore, when you eat a lot of sugar, you know one of the number one things that it steals is your B vitamins. Do you know what your B vitamins are good for? Your nervous system. When you have a weak or debilitated nervous system, now we're entering into the world of Parkinson's disease. We're entering into the world of Alzheimer's. We're entering into the world of ALS and all these different types of diseases that are directly connected with the neurological system. So sugar is definitely something we want to stay away from regardless. But when it comes to diabetes, that is not to be our focus. Sugar, sugar, sugar. Our focus is to be what? Fat on the diet and fat on the body. Those are the two areas that we really want to watch out for. And remember, family, one of the worst places to have fat is where? Is on the stomach. You want to get it away from the stomach. Now, you want to get it away from everywhere. Okay? You want to get it away from everywhere. But you especially want to get it away from the stomach. Okay? And why is that? Because we have a concentration of very, very vital functional organs in that gastrointestinal area. So the more fat buildup we have there, the more that complications can have there, and you don't want complications happening next to your liver or the gallbladder or the spleen. You understand that? In all these vital areas that play such an incredible role of keeping your body healthy, your kidneys and all these different things. So obviously we want fat in general off the body, but especially from that gut area. You really want to go ahead and we want to do what we can to eliminate that. Now, when we think about this, malnutrition, when we often talk about malnutrition, we think that malnutrition is, kind of like these pictures. We think about that. But I want to show you that even though that's true, there's a new malnutrition, and it looks like this. You understand that? That's malnutrition too. You see, we have to get away from the idea that if I eat food and if it makes me feel full, I'm well nourished. We have to understand that you and I were made to eat food with life in it. We were to eat to live. We were not meant to live just to eat. And we got to understand that difference. You got to eat to live. You got to think about it. Did you know what the Bible says in Proverbs 23? I want to challenge you to read it whenever you get a chance. When you get a chance, look at Proverbs 23, verses 1 and 2. God actually takes what we eat so seriously that he used most forceful language in Proverbs 23, 1 and 2. The Bible actually says that, my son, if you sit before a king, God says, consider diligently what has been set before you. And then it says, and put a knife to your throat if you be a man controlled by your appetite. God actually said, put a knife to your throat if you're controlled by your appetite. You see, we have to understand that many of us are digging our graves with our teeth. And we need to understand that we are the ones that are the architects to a very large degree to our fortune. And we got to control a lot better what we're eating, how we're eating, when we're eating, and these type of things, because this is how it starts to produce, unfortunately, this type of picture. And this is not just because someone is big. We used to use a term, we say, man, those people are healthy. You know, and we'll say the healthy big because they got all this fat around them. But that does not mean that their bodies are well nourished. You understand that? So we've really got to change the way we think and understand we must eat food that puts nutrition in our system. And food that is nutritious is not disgusting. Okay? Often we think, oh man, nutritious food, oh, that's it. I'm not going to enjoy meals anymore. Of course you're going to enjoy meals. It might mean a re-education of our tongue. Don't get me wrong. Some of us are used to blood, grease, and fat. That's what we feed our tongues. And our taste buds get used to anything that it repeatedly gets. So I'm not going to lie to you. It may mean that some of us are going to have to re-educate our tongues. We are going to have to get to a place to say, I got to learn how to appreciate certain things that I probably never appreciated before. You know, some of us love to overwhelm our food with salt or sugar or this, that, and the other. We're going to have to re-educate the tongue. So don't get me wrong. There's going to be a part of this where you're going to have to retrain yourselves because some of us are used to sweet stuff. I challenge any of you, and this would be so good for you to do. Along with eating your food, do the next 2 weeks and let everything that you drink only be water. Let your only drink be water. 2 weeks. Now watch this. If there's anybody in this room that is used to drinking juice, anybody in this room, if you're used to drinking juice, if you go 2 weeks just drinking water, every time you would have drunk juice, you just drink water instead. Water, 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 water. That's it. 2 weeks later, when you go back to your juice, you're going to be like, whoa. You're like, man, this thing is loaded with sugar. It's like it's the same sugar you was drinking 2 weeks ago. It's just that what happened? You retrained your tongue. You retrained your tongue, you retrained the brainwave signals in your brain. Your body was able to respond differently. So that's the point. We got to retrain that tongue. So when I talk about eating food that is nutritious, you will enjoy it, no question about it. But don't be surprised if, yes, you're going to have to retrain your tongues a little bit, retrain the mind a little bit to appreciate food on a different level, okay? Fats are something that's pretty serious, and fats are not all bad. Fats are actually needed. It's just that we have to understand the difference between bad fats and good fats, okay? It's the bad fats that we don't want because that's what's contributive to the diabetes. It's not the good fats, okay? So if we were to talk about bad fats versus good fats, you know, we kind of have to draw that line. So here's an example of what we'll call the good guys and the bad guys. I realize that some of you are back there and you probably can't see that too well on the screen, but I'm thankful that they stated earlier you'll be able to see it. I almost want to play with this thing because this screen can be more crisp. Actually, I've been meaning to address that from nights previously, so if we can address that, but I won't do it now because I'll probably mess it up. But the point is, when you think about your unsaturated fats, right? Polyunsaturated fatty acids, monounsaturated fats. These are the ones that reduce heart disease, provides those antioxidants. Remember we talked about oxidative stress last night? Okay? It's your good fats here. And that's the one that reduces heart disease. Antioxidants, vitamin E, and lowers your cholesterol. What are your sources of your good fats? That's going to be things like vegetable oils, fatty fish. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Flax seeds, walnuts, olives, olive oil, almonds, avocado, Brazil nuts, cashews, and more. Notice that the majority of this is plant-based. Did you notice that? Majority of it is plant-based. Only one was up there, which was the fatty fish, and I'm going to hit that in just a second. But look at this here. These are the bad guys. What are the bad guys? What are the ones that are contributing to the types of diabetes and all these issues that we're having? What are the ones that are contributing to that? That's your trans fats and your hydrogenated fats and oils. Okay? Those are the ones you watch out for. So when you get your butter, when you're going grocery shopping, read the back of it. You see anything that says trans fats or hydrogenated oil, put that thing back on the shelf. You understand that? You sooner want to get a butter that if you're going to pick up a butter, then you want to sooner do that. Honey, what's the butter that is a good one to get for those who go grocery shopping again? What's it called? Yeah, you can get your earth balance butter. No hydrogenated oils or any of these trans fats or anything like that. And that's pretty much, I think you can even get that thing in Walmart now. I mean, it's very, very widespread, okay? So the point is, you want to stay away from this stuff. Now, where it gets complicated is when we start buying all this processed food. Once we start buying the processed food, it's been processed in all these oils and all these other things. So what that really means is you're going to have to learn how to eat from home a little bit more. You're going to have to learn how to prepare it from home. And then that way you bring it with you rather than buying it pre-prepared and then it has all this extra stuff in it that's creating these problems, okay? So what are some of the issues that comes with trans fats and hydrogenated fats and oils? They raise your bad cholesterol. They clog your arteries. They increase your risk for heart disease. What are the sources for these type of fats and oils? That's your animal products, dairy, butter, fried food, lard, packaged foods, etc. So that's the ones that you're watching out for. That's the ones that you're saying, let me keep that out of my diet. Keep that out of my refrigerator. Keep that out of my cupboards. Those are the ones you're staying away from. These are the bad fats. Now, if we talk about fatty fish for a second, it is true. Fatty fish is going to definitely give you some of those omega-3s, omega-6, and these are things that are good for the body in that context. However, we need to start understanding when you eat food that's good, you should only eat food that's good. Don't eat food that will help you on one side and hurt you on another. You understand that? So why do I say that? Well, with fatty fish, it's true. It'll give you more of the unsaturated fats, which is good, but here's what else it'll give you. A study by scientists at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle linked eating a lot of oily fish or taking potent fish oil supplements to a 43% increased risk for prostate cancer overall, and a 71% increased risk for aggressive prostate cancer. Their report was published online in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute. So literally, taking all these fish oil supplements, I know some of us do that because some of us may have had heart issues, hypertension, and we're like, man, I'm trying to do what's good for my heart, get that omega-3. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can't get any better than right there, flax seeds. You get some flax seeds. You can get that, my friends, in most stores today. Get the seed, don't eat the seed. Don't take it just as a seed. If you have a blender, if you have a little bullet, if you have a coffee grinder, anything like that, you can go to a thrift store and get a coffee grinder for $2, and you get yourself a coffee grinder. You get yourself a bag of those flax seeds, and then you just take enough that'll last you for about a week. You don't store flaxseed forever. Flaxseed is something that can go rancid, and you don't want to put it in your system once it does that. So you usually just make enough that will take you through the week. You take some of those flax seeds, put it in the coffee grinder, bzz, make that thing, powder it up, and then you just put it inside of a holder and you seal it well and keep it refrigerated. When you have your, when you have cereal, when you have oatmeal, when you have a salad, you just take yourself a nice tablespoon of that and spread it all over. When you put that in, you're getting omega-3, you're getting omega-6, you're getting omega-9. I mean, you're getting the same things you would have got from the fish without it giving you a 43% increased chance of getting prostate or some of these other problems. You understand that? So that's just how wonderful it is. And then, of course, walnuts, olives. I mean, you got options. You really have options. So you don't need the fatty fish, even though it does provide unsaturated fats. Okay? Let's continue. Did you know, this is a picture of fat, animal fat. Did you know on opening night, do you remember the opening night? I told you that if we followed God's plan, I said there'd be no such thing as rape. Remember we was talking about that? For those of us who was here open night, if we follow God, there'd be no such thing as rape. There'd be no such thing as infidelity. All these things. There'd be no such thing as sexually transmitted. Do you know no sexually transmitted disease would exist if everybody in the world followed thou shalt not commit adultery? You understand that? Did you know there would be perhaps no diabetics whatsoever if we followed what God said a long time ago? It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings that you eat neither fat nor blood. Did you know the Bible actually said we should not eat fat? And the problem is we think, oh, that's for Jews. What do you think? The fat all of a sudden becomes healthy for Christians? Fat is fat. Family, fat is fat. Come on now. Let's be like Jesus did not come to cleanse the fat. He came to cleanse sinners. Fat is still fat, and it still does damage to us. And a lot of times when we eat these animal-based products and what have you, we're eating it with the blood, and we're eating it with the fat, and we actually question why we're so sick. If you go to the doctor and you think you're sick, what do you think what are they going to do to confirm if you're sick? What are they going to do? Talk to me. What are they going to do? Are they going to draw your blood? If they need to confirm you are sick, Natural protocol. They're going to draw your blood. So what that tells us is that disease flows through. So if we eat animals with the blood commingled in their meat, if the animal is diseased, then whatever that animal has is going to flow through its meat. So when we eat the meat, we're getting not just its meat. We're getting whatever disease was also flowing through that animal. God says, I love you so much. God says, I love you so much that I'm going to give you instruction to protect you from getting sick. And God says, the way I'm going to do it is I'm giving you instruction. Even if you ate a clean animal, God says, make sure the fat and the blood is removed. And by the way, that was not a Jewish thing, because if you go back to Genesis 9, verses 4 and 5, that was an instruction given to Noah and his family. And Noah existed before Abraham, and Abraham is the father of the Jews. Noah was a Gentile. He was a non-Jew. And God told Noah, no blood commingled with the meat when you eat it. So this is something that is for Jew, it's for Gentile. Somebody says, oh, that's the Old Testament. You need to read Acts chapter 15. Read the whole chapter. In Acts the 15th chapter, literally, Peter and the gang, they all said, let's come to a conclusion. And they said, our conclusion is that the new believing Christians should eat no blood. You understand that? So it's a New Testament teaching. It's all throughout the scripture. And I guarantee you, if we were to start stepping back away from these animal-based products, especially with the blood and fat in it, you would by default start seeing an improvement in your health. So this becomes something that we should take very seriously, because God took it seriously enough to have it written a long time ago. Continuing. What else contributes to diabetes? Well, let's talk about that. When I started going through some of these foods books here, what I really appreciate is this. If you look at it, this is what the doctors are finding. What they did is they have an arrow that points down, and then they have an arrow that points up. The arrow that points up lets you know, here are all the foods the diabetics can eat. But then when the arrow that's pointing down, that says these are the foods that diabetics need to stay absolutely away from it. Okay? So when they started running through these things, here's what they said. They said, what is it that can contribute to diabetes? Number one, fried foods. If you're diabetic, you want to start moving away. And quite honestly, that includes fried tofu. Okay? So you want to understand whether it's fried chicken or fried tofu. Both of them, we're going to say, as long as I'm battling with this disease, I need to go ahead and take a step back from these things. Okay? Number two, white rice. Basically, your refined grains, quite honestly. Because again, as I showed you the whole grain last night, I'll probably give you a prize if you can remember. Who can remember, what are the three things, especially our visitors, what are those three things that makes up the whole grain? What was it called? Bran, germ, and endosperm. Very good. Bran, germ, endosperm. Now here's where you get your prize, because you thought you were going to get a prize just for remembering. Here's where you get your prize. What's in the bran? What's in the germ? What's in the endosperm? You answer that, you're getting a prize. I will not leave this place without giving you a prize. I'm going to go in Brother Bliss's pocket and I'm going to give you something. But go ahead. Anybody remember? Fiber. Which one gives you fiber? Because there was only one. Bran. Very good. Talk to me. What else? B vitamins. That's true. Which one? Which one B vitamins? Endosperm and the germ. Wrong. It is not the germ. It is the bran. Go ahead. Y'all need to think about that one a little bit more. The bottom line is, it's not that. Is that right? This is only what? Endosperm. Very good. So what's going to happen is, because it's not high in fiber content, when you eat the white rice, or when you eat the white pasta, or when you eat the white bread, what's going to happen is it's going to shoot your glucose up, and it's going to cause more glucose buildup in the system. Then there will be insulin. And as a result of that, you're going to have a high glucose flowing through your bloodstream. That's why you do not want to. We shouldn't be doing it even if you don't have diabetes, quite honestly, but how much the more if you have diabetes. Stay away from these white foods, okay? Because they can hurt us, okay? You understand that? Obviously, also, we want to stay away from smoking. You know, some people struggle with that. Yes, my friend? You know, a lot of people do that. Can I mix flaxseed with white rice? You know, one time I was in Vietnam, and when I was in Vietnam, I was like, okay, where's your brown rice at? They was like, we don't have it. And I said, okay. So what they did was they gave me the white rice, and then what I did was I double compensated with extra salad and extra things that, you know, were high fiber content. So if you're in Vietnam, then yes, you could do that. But if you're in America, no, you can't do that. I'm not going to let you do that. Not if you're under my jurisdiction. I won't let you do that. All right? So, you know, and that is a good rule to keep in mind, is if you find yourself stuck in some of those situations where you're like, oh, you know, my ideal meals, I can't do it here, then that is actually something that can be done. Those are your one-offs. Okay, all I have is white rice right now. I'll go ahead and take that, but I'm going to compensate by maybe adding more on a fiber content on the other side. That's how you try to balance it off. You understand? But as best as you can, we want to go from white rice to brown rice. We want to go to whole grain pastas and whole grain breads. That's the goal. Go there. Because then that way, that's going to work a whole lot better with your system. It allows things to be digested much more slowly. I mean, man, they have so many pastas today. Today, I remember I told y'all about the fettuccine Alfredo that my wife and I, you know, learn how to make. I mean, we had that today for dinner. And I mean, boy, that thing, I mean, again, I said, I can't wait for the class to taste this one. You know, and you're going to taste it on Sunday. But, you know, there's so many whole grain pastas now. I mean, you got pastas made out of quinoa. You got pastas made out of brown rice. You got pastas that are just made out of so many wonderful grains. So you got options. The key is we got to start pulling back from a lot of this white. This is the stuff that's hurting us, especially if you're diabetic. Now, smoking. You know, it depends. I mean, not that it depends, should we or should we not smoke? No, we shouldn't. But it depends on who you're talking to. Christian organizations, Christian people, which seems to represent quite a bit of you here, maybe all of you, I don't know. But the point is that you would think something like this is understood, but it's not. Some of us, sometimes we have addictions. We grew up with things and habits, and, you know, we just don't know how to overcome them, okay? And as a result of that, smoking is a reality for some of us. So if it is, I am so thankful that I can share something with you, which is called the Stop Smoking Urge Recipe. This is something that is phenomenal. If you know anybody who is hooked on cigarettes, hooked on cigars, hooked on weed, or any of those type of things, you can help them make this recipe and put it into practice. And this is a way that it can actually assist them in overcoming the urge. I always like to recommend the detox. Okay, I recommend a detox. I'm trying to find out where to stand. There's so many cameras up. All right, so I recommend a detox to individuals. And if you would like to know about a very simple, very easy to apply detox, I'll tell you about that on Sunday as well. But while the person is on a detox, ever so often they might have an urge to still go ahead and smoke. If they do, this helps kill that urge very, very quickly. Very quickly, okay? It's a stop smoking urge recipe. Very, very good. So this is something that you can share with them, and it'll prove to be a tremendous blessing, okay? Very good. You got all your pictures? All right, excellent. So let's continue. What are some things that you can eat? You know, you get tired of talking about can. You want to talk about can. And you know one of the things you actually can eat as a diabetic is right here, whole grains for sure. Remember that. You want to do whole grains because that's going to work together with the pancreas. That's going to help that when that pancreas releases that insulin, that it's going to be able to have enough insulin flowing with the glucose because it's a slower breakdown process than if it were the white stuff. The white stuff gets broken down very quickly because it's a simple sugar. It's a simple carbohydrate. But when it's a whole grain, it's what's called a complex carbohydrate, and it's going to break down a lot slower, and hence it's going to work more in harmony with digestion. That's why no enriched, whole. The grain must be what? Always remember another way of looking at a Bible verse. What God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. When God made the grain, he made it how? Whole, and that's how it's supposed to stay. You understand that? And that will work for you, okay? So keep that in mind. Whole grains, that's excellent for those who are diabetic, okay? In addition to that, fruit. My dad stayed away from fruit most of his diabetic life because he was told by his doctor, Mr. Lemon, you can't eat too much fruit. It's going to work against you. And do you know that some of the fruits that are best tolerated by diabetics are bananas, mangoes? You understand that? These are fruits that normally have pretty decent glycemic levels to it. But these are actually well tolerated because they have the fiber component, they have the phytonutrients, they have other things in it. So therefore, if you're going to eat a banana, the only thing I'll say is eat it when it's nice and ripe. Don't eat it when it's just like super browned. Once it gets really, really brown, lots and lots of brown spots, then, go ahead and replace that with something else. Give it to somebody else who, may not be struggling with diabetes. Let them use it for their smoothies or what have you. But for yourselves, if you have diabetes, let it get to that nice solid yellow. Make sure the green is gone. Get solid yellow, then go ahead and enjoy that banana. Go ahead and enjoy that mango. All right? But fresh fruits work phenomenally with individuals who are diabetes. Because remember, with diabetes, you also have complications. And one of the complications, as you saw, were the kidneys. That's the big thing you watch out for with diabetes, is you don't want to end up going into a situation of renal failure. Your kidneys is a master filter, along with your liver, for getting toxins and poisons out of your body. So the more that you can eat raw fruits, that's helping to give you various properties, all those beautiful antioxidants, etc., that's going to really help as it relates to the kidney. Now, nuts are very, very good. Nuts are actually phenomenal, but nuts, you must be temperate with it. You have to be temperate with it. Number one, because it has fat. It has a fat content. And nuts will put some weight on you. If you want to lose, if you want to gain weight, you'd be amazed. You start putting nuts in your smoothies, stuff like that, and drinking them, it'll build you up. But in addition to that, nuts are also high protein. Nuts are high protein, okay? Even though it's a plant protein, but nevertheless, it's still high protein. So if you're eating a lot of high protein products, you want to be mindful of that because that can still have a negative impact on your kidneys. Your kidneys do not respond well to an overindulgence of protein in the diet, even if it's plant-based. So you can't just go protein crazy. You have to be temperate with it, okay? So that's why the general rule is about a handful of nuts, and that's going to sustain you for a day, a handful of nuts. Again, we're talking about 200 pounds under. You're over that, then the variables start changing. In addition to that, your legumes, all sorts of beans. Beans are absolutely wonderful for diabetics. Wonderful for diabetics. And again, they walk through these things. They go into the specifics of the avocado or the onion. They go into the specifics of, the artichoke or the legumes. It says, in spite of containing between 20 and 30% carbohydrates, legumes are very well tolerated by diabetics. They help regulate the level of glucose in the blood because of their fiber content and the unique histological structure of their seeds. Therefore, legumes are a fundamental food for diabetics. They're perfect. They're very good for diabetics. All right? Finally, your fresh vegetables. You can't go wrong. When we talk about cancer on Thursday, that's one of the things we're going to really start seeing. More than, I'm going to let you in on this now, and we'll build on it on Thursday. More than ever, because cancer is such a runner-up to heart disease, and we got to give serious attention to it, one of the things I'd like to encourage you to start doing more and still more, start eating a lot more vegetables. Vegetables have a lot more of the mineral content in it that helps fight against various types of cancer cells and so on, and cancer growth in the system, even more than fruit. So that's why even though you do an abundance of fruit, bless your heart, that's good. Eat an abundance of fruit, that's fine. But my friends, I want to encourage you, we need to start intelligently getting more vegetables in our system. We need to start doing that. If some of you do green drinks, or if you use a healthy green powder, or something like that, those are good things to do because we need to give our body as much combat force as possible. How much the more? When you have a disease, because the truth of the matter is, and I don't say this to scare you because you have nothing to fear, as long as you know that God is on your side, but the reality is in the statistical world that once you have diabetes, there are certain types of cancers that you can become more prone to. And as a result of that, I need more combat. I need more fighting initiative in my system. So that's the reason why I want to encourage you to do that. Same thing with hypertension, same thing with a lot of other diseases. Once you have the disease, you got to be far more diligent to say, let me do what I can to build up my body so that I don't have to worry about these things. So I want to encourage you, eat vegetables. Get a lot of vegetables in, high-level vegetables, especially dark green. Get them in, okay? Even Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine, and medicine be your food. You know, wise statement. It's just that God said it first. God actually said it right here in Psalms 104. You see, one of the things I'm big on is giving God the credit that he deserves. And it says in Psalms 104, way before Hippocrates was around or anybody else, the Bible says he causes the grass to grow for the cattle and the herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. And that word service, and when you look it up, it actually means to minister. God knew that when I make that herb of the field, it's designed to minister to man. And that's why God knew the food is designed to be your medicine. Those herbs, they're designed to be your medicine. And so God knew that way before Hippocrates or any of these other folks that we give so much incredible credit to. God knew it, and he deserves the credit because he made Hippocrates. Now, the same way that you have an owner's manual is the same way that God has an owner's manual. It's called the Bible. And what we need to do is we need to learn how to take care of ourselves according to the text, according to the manual. If you were to look at the manual, family, I'm just going to be honest with you. This was God's manual in the beginning. In the beginning of time, God said, look, I've given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food. God says, I know what I'm doing. I gave you the grains. I gave you the fruits. I gave you the nuts, and I gave you the seeds. God says, I gave those things to you. After man falls into sin, he begins to magnify various types of herbs of the field as well. So when God was done, by the time you get to Genesis 3, mankind is on a diet of fruits, grains, nuts, vegetables, and seeds. And it was all whole foods. And this is to date. T. Colin Campbell, who put together the book, The China Study. What is it that everybody's raving over it for? He taught the world you need to be on what God prescribed. He's a millionaire. He's the man that now everybody's going to Cornell to take his classes, those one-year classes that they offer now. And all he's doing is for $1,500. You did the price check too. I did too. And here it is, but what is he telling everybody? God was right. That's all he's telling. What is T. Colin Campbell? What is Mr. McDougall? I mean, if you look at Mr. Esselstyn, all of them are telling us the same thing. God was right. He was right all along. It's just that I'm not hearing them say anything about God. I watched a lot of their programs. I didn't hear the God factor yet. But I'm here to tell you, this was God's idea. This was his plan. And this was his prescription. This was in his owner's manual that he gave to each and every one of us. And it makes a lot of sense because when you really start going through it, family, you got to remember, and the Lord God formed man out of the what? Dust. So what are we basically? We are what? We're dust. We are a result, a product of the clay. We come from the ground. Is that right? And that's why when we're alive, we're living dust. When we go to death, what are we? We're dust. We go right back to dust again. Is that right? So I want you to think about this. Think about this with me, because this is the part sometimes we don't consider. We come from the soil. That's why it should not surprise us that we can only live by the things that come from the soil. Does that make sense? That actually makes sense. And so watch this. When you think about it, did you know what is it that a man needs to live? What is it that a woman needs to live? We need things like magnesium. If you are low on magnesium, you're going to have high heart rate. You're going to have confusion of the mind. You're going to suffer with anxiety and depression. When you're low on magnesium, you go through a lot. What do we need? We need magnesium. We need phosphorus. We need calcium. We need potassium. We need sodium. We need iron. We need iodine. If you got any type of thyroid problems, sometimes that comes directly connected to lack of iodine. Okay? We need iodine. We need chlorine. We need sulfur. But all of these things come from the ground. You understand that? So these are like the main essentials that we absolutely need just to live, thrive, move, and have our being. And all of these things come from the ground. That's why we're trying to help people understand as lifestyle educators that, listen, it's not a fad to say we need to be on a whole food, plant-based diet. It's the best program that God has given, and no man has improved on that program. Nobody has improved on that program. And now what's happening is, now that we're getting so sick, it's just that now we're ready to kind of hear it, where before we were like, nobody's going to take me away from my chicken. You know, when we had that attitude. I've been in meetings where just like this, and I had a brother get up. He said, I am not getting up my chicken. I'm not giving it up. And he disrupted the meeting and everything. I said, this brother, he got mad because we talked about letting go of chicken. And so, you know, what do you do in a situation like that? So he's standing up and like, I'm not letting go of my chicken. What you going to do about it? And I was just like, I said, can I ask you something? And he said, yes. And I said, what is it that chicken leg has done for you to make you so loyal to it? I said, because Jesus would love that kind of loyalty. If you could be that loyal to Christ, I will not let go of Jesus. Can you imagine somebody standing like that before the world? This brother's standing for chicken. And so I'm like, if you could give that kind of faithfulness to God, the Lord can do great things with you and through you for his glory. And I said, I want you to tell me what it gave you. Because you're here tonight because you have diabetes. You're here tonight. You were here last night because you had hypertension. You were here. So that's what your chicken gave you. You understand? I was trying to help him think and to reason through it. This is God's program. This is why we should choose foods that come from a root system, my friends. This is the reason why we're talking about choose foods that come from a root system. What else can you do with diabetes? Of course, you gotta get that exercise in. One of the best forms of exercise that you can do is still walking. Did you know? Did you ever hear this man right here? Edward Payson Weston. You can look him up on the internet. Born 1839, when the average lifespan was 40 years. In his prime, he walked 50 to 100 miles per day. At age 71, he walked across America in 88 days. In his mid-80s, he still walked 25 miles a day. He died at the age of 90 after being struck by a car. Why did I put that last fact in there? I put that fact in there to show you that he didn't even die from what a lot of people die from at 90. He got hit by a car. You understand that? Walking. Walking. There's something about walking we don't understand yet. And that's my point, because some of us are trying to be Superman and do ninja stuff and, all this. We're trying to do all of that stuff. But if you could commit to walking and just you have much organ involvement when you walk. If you and I could commit to doing these things, you'd be amazed at how it builds up your body. Every hour of exercise adds an extra 2 hours to your life. Okay? Walking in long, Gladys Burrell at age 92 completed the fastest walking marathon for her age group at 9 hours and 53 minutes. Gladys has a strong faith in God, a positive outlook on life, helps the needy around her, and eats largely of whole plant foods. She regularly walks 30 to 50 miles a week, frequently accompanied by a training partner. 30 to 50 miles a week. 92. 92. What's your excuse? What's my excuse? You understand that? Let's get it in, family. Walk. You want to start walking, okay? Oh, by the way, when I say walk, I'm not talking about this. I'm not talking about playing with anything in your hand, having horrible posture, and preparing to mess up your C5, C6 disc in your neck. I'm not talking about that kind of walk. I'm talking about if you're going to walk, we're going to do something called brisk walking. This is when you understand that? When your arms are moving while you're walking and everything. You're on a mission. And whenever you start going up those hills, instead of your back straight, now you're going to bend it forward a little bit. You're going to go up that hill. That is brisk walking. Absolutely phenomenal for the body. How long are we doing this for in a day? Who remembers? Just 30 minutes. Just 30 minutes. You can break it up. The goal is 30 minutes a day, but you're breaking it up. 10-minute interval here, 10-minute interval there, 15-minute, 50. Break it up, or if you can do a straight 30, do a straight 30. But give it to your body. Your body needs it, and it'll thank you for it, okay? What else can we do? Water, sunlight. These are actual things that you can do for your body when it comes to diabetes, okay? In recent years, researchers have linked low vitamin D levels to insulin resistance. Did you know that? Do you even get your vitamin D checked, family? Have you noticed that many of us are deficient? Okay, so we need to change that. One of the ways that we can change that, get out there in that sunlight. Overcoming insulin resistance in particular could be a way to head off type 2 diabetes before it sets in. Proper rest. Can't talk about this enough. We need to go to sleep. Not now, but we need to go to sleep. And proper rest. We're almost done. Watch this. Just wrapping it up. Dr. Eve Van Cauter is a sleep science trailblazer whose research team at the University of Chicago recently published the first study to specifically examine the physical health impact of ordinary sleep deprivation. Now, she calls the impact of sleep debt astonishing. Many of us are in sleep debt. You know, we owe ourselves. So here's what it says. After 4 hours of sleep for 6 consecutive nights, healthy young men had blood test results that nearly matched those of diabetics. Getting about 4 hours of sleep a night, and that's it. They found that you do that after 6 nights of just getting 4 hours of sleep, it literally impacts their body's ability to break down glucose. Look at what it says. Their ability to process blood sugar was reduced by 30%. They had a huge drop in their insulin response, and they had elevated levels of a stress hormone called cortisol, which can lead to hypertension and memory impairment. So literally, you gotta get rest. You gotta make it a habit, family, to go to bed at night. Yes?
Back that up so I can get her name, please.
Which part?
That's it,
Dr. Eve Van Cauter, C-A-U-T-E-R, University of Chicago. Okay? So this is something that you want to pay attention to. We want to start shooting for bedtime. Now, when we think about bedtime, look at this. The Dark Deception is a pretty interesting book talking about getting proper rest. And it says, go to bed around the same time each night. So that's the first rule. We're going to try to develop our regularity, going to bed at the same time. Then after that, what's the ideal time? 10 o'clock. But take time before that to prepare. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to hustle. Oh, 10 o'clock. Okay. And then, you know, just jump in. Don't do it that way. What you're going to be doing is, you know, I need to be out by 10 o'clock. I got to be down for the count by 10 o'clock. So what that may mean is that as early as 9 o'clock, you're going to start dimming lights around the house. I'm serious. You're going to start dimming lights. Don't have it bright, blazing lights like that hitting you in your face. Just start dimming the lights down, because that's sending a signal to the mind. All right, we're going to let that serotonin go down, and we're preparing for that melatonin to rise. Okay? So start dimming the lights like around 9 o'clock. If you take a tea or something like that, a chamomile or whatever it is to calm you down, make sure you take that in enough time that you can drink it, go to the bathroom, do what you got to do, and then go to bed so you don't have it interrupting you in the middle of the night. But the key is that you want to start winding down. And the worst thing you can do is look at your cell phone. Put that stuff away. When you want to put that thing away about a good hour to 2 hours before you go to bed. Because even though the blue lights, you know, it does have a wakefulness upon the mind, but in addition to that, even when you set it on, there's a way some phones are intelligent enough that you can now dim the blue light, but it just dims the blue light. It doesn't eliminate the blue light. You understand that? So if you're still playing around and before you go to bed and you're like, yeah, let me check this out, or whatever, and then you still go to bed and then you wonder, man, why is it I'm having a bit of a struggle? Probably either going to sleep or staying asleep. That could very much be one of the reasons why. So you really want to do what you can to try to create an atmosphere that you can get to bed at a decent time. I'm going to go past these here. Hot and cold showers. This is good for circulation. One of the things with diabetes is sometimes we suffer with neuropathy and we get some of these challenges. I want to encourage you to try this. In fact, I want to know if some of you can make a covenant with me tonight. When you go home tonight, I'm going to ask you to give this a shot. Is that okay? Look at what it says. Hot and cold. Here's what you do. The procedure is simple, easy to remember. Just think 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 3 times. 3:30, okay? 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 3 times. Here's what you're going to do. 3 minutes of hot water, followed by 30 seconds of absolute cold water, and then you're going to repeat it 3 times. How many of you can do that? Why are y'all shaking your head? You afraid of water? Family, 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 family. You can do this. By the way, this can actually have almost a sedative effect. it has a wonderful calming effect upon the body, okay? You're just going to go in there 3 minutes, as hot as you can take it without scalding yourself. And then you take that, you can do a minute and a half in the front, minute and a half in the back. And then when you get down to 58, 59, 3 minutes, hot water off. Only cold, freezing cold, and let it hit you. Boom, and let it hit you for 30 seconds. And you just let it hit you. Wow, okay. And you're nice and awake. You're hitting high notes. And then you just turn it around, let it hit you again on your back, and you let that cold water just hit you. And you do that just for 30 seconds. When the 30 seconds are over, turn back on your hot water. And then do it one more time. You will be amazed at the blood rush that it does for the body. It makes your body feel so relaxed. And it is a wonderful preparation right before going to bed. But what it also does is it stimulates the white blood cells, okay? It helps promote good circulation throughout the body. And this is an excellent way to give your body some awesome health, okay? In closing, stress. Can't talk about it enough. A lot of people are not aware, but family, what's very unfortunate is the things that we can talk about, all these things that we're doing, as I told you, if we don't learn how to get a control over this stress, it can null and void a lot of the other procedures that we're trying to do to make ourselves well, okay? And so stress is now being understood as a contributor to diabetes. The American Diabetes Association says it like this: in people with diabetes, stress can alter blood glucose levels. Stress, it actually alters it. And how does it do that? Well, people under stress may not take good care of themselves. So that's the first way. Some people, when you're stressed out, you're like, I don't care about this hot and cold. I don't care about food. I don't care about anything. I'm angry right now. I'm bothered. I'm stressed out. I need to eat. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And we forget all the rules. So that's the first way. They may forget or not have time to check their glucose levels or plan good meals. So that's the first way stress negatively impacts us. But then the second way it does is stress hormones may also alter blood glucose levels directly, okay? Scientists have studied the effects of stress on glucose levels in animals and people. Diabetic mice under physical or mental stress have elevated glucose levels. In people with type 2 diabetes, mental stress often raises blood glucose levels. And this is why, again, I'm encouraging you tonight and every night, every day, remember the blessed privilege of prayer. Remember that the Bible says in Psalms 55:17, evening, morning, and at noon, will I pray and cry aloud, and he will hear my voice. And the more that we commune with God, there's a promise. The promise is, thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. And that's the key. And I really want to encourage you, learn how to develop a greater communion with God. We're going to give some suggestions on that on Sunday. Sunday's a very practical day for us. So we're going to talk about what are some practical ways that I can really commune with God better, that I can really get the handle on some of these stress factors that are in my life, because we know we all have them. But I have a question for you. How many of us understood what we studied tonight? You understood it? How many of us are willing to make a covenant, especially if we are afflicted with this disease? How many of us are willing to cooperate with the principles that have been shared so that we can experience a higher level of health? Amen? All right, very good. I'm so thankful for this. Why don't we go ahead and seal it with a word of prayer? Let's stand together. And please remember, if you, good, it looks like, I think I'm seeing them in your hands. If you don't have one, you can certainly raise your hand. We'll get you one. But if you would like a consultation, whether it be for diabetes or for something else, please fill this out, get it back to us. Put your phone number, put your name there, the best way to contact you, so that way we can reach out to you, okay? Please make us aware of this. We thank you for that. Let's go ahead and let's close with a word of prayer. Loving Father, we are so grateful. We thank you so much for the privilege to be able to talk and to discuss lifestyle habits that you created. Exercise, getting proper hydration, putting only that which is nutritious in our systems, having a state of mind that is so focused on you that it grants us peace that passes all understanding and removes our stress. All of these things are gifts that come straight from heaven. I pray that you'll help us to partake of these gifts and to enjoy their blessings. And may you truly help us to be made free, even from the bondage not only of sin, but of sickness. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Tomorrow night, we're going to talk about arthritis. We're going to talk about that very strong, so we hope to see you there. When you go outside, you're going to see some little booklets and things that if you think any of them would prove to be beneficial to you, you will be more than welcome to go ahead and obtain them. My wife and children will be meeting you there. God bless you all. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening. Have a good night. Safe drive home.